Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of NOHS Roundtable Discussions. We are here today with Ms. Julie Hilt. She is a restorative justice practitioner, and she works with young folks. And it's awesome. She has an amazing background. We're going to let her take the floor and introduce herself, talk about some cool things, and then we're going to get this conversation rolling. Julie, take it away.
Well, hello, Casey, and everybody who's listening. So as Casey said, my name is Julie Hilt. I originally was born and raised in London, moved here 23 years ago, I think. And my experience of race and cultural identity growing up in London was somewhat different to what I experienced when I got here. And having three mixed race children, we never experienced any kind of prejudice or racial issues. I'm not saying it's perfect back in England. I'm just speaking about my personal experience. So when my children entered school and I was encountering issues that I found really disturbing as a parent for my own children and for all young people in general. And then so that kind of led into a path of mediation, and from then on restorative justice. When I found restorative justice, I thought, yes, this is the answer. And so and we can talk about that a little bit more as we get going. But so that led to me founding my own little business called Alternative Restorative Communities. And basically, all the work I do is geared towards reducing the racial and ethnic disparity in the juvenile justice system, and interrupting entry points into that juvenile justice system, and building strong communities. My big passion is community and community connections, because regardless of what we look like or how old we are, we all have to live in community together. So the stronger the communities, the better for all of us. It's a win-win for everybody. And so through that pathway, I ended up meeting Casey, Steve, through the NOHS community.
So when you talk about community, right, where do you see community kind of falls in line with restorative justice? Like, what's the connection there? Why is it important?
Well, because we all have to live in community together, and we don't want to be afraid of each other, and we are all more alike than we're different, and we need to realize that. There is a connection. We are all connected ultimately, we know that. But we don't want to be living in fear of each other, because we don't look the same, or because we've maybe experienced some harm by another person. So the beauty of restorative justice is that it includes everybody that's been impacted by some harm or an incident, and it gives everybody a voice, and it gives everybody a voice to be heard about how they've been impacted and how a situation is going to be corrected. And that way round, nobody's feeling othered or afraid. For example, maybe you have a home invasion, and then the home people who live in the home that's been invaded can be left in fear, thinking, well, were we targeted? Is somebody watching us? Have no idea who did this or why, and then can sort of build up a picture of an individual or individuals, huge monsters that keep us living in fear. But traditional justice system would say, okay, so a harm has been caused, a law has been broken, who broke it, and how we're going to punish them. In that way, the justice system decides what the punishment is going to be, and there's no real opportunity for healing or accountability on that in that way of thinking, because so someone's been punished, but they haven't necessarily had an opportunity to understand the consequences of their actions. Yes, they may have been in detention for a period of time, but with restorative justice we try to connect the dots, so to speak. So we take what harm has been caused and how is it going to be repaired. And so the person or people responsible have an opportunity to put right what they have, the harm that they have caused. Sometimes that might mean that you still have to do some time in detention, but there's a healing and educational piece to it. Um, and on the whole, we've tried to keep people in community, not remove them from community, because then when you're removed from your community, you feel, you have no connection, nobody, you don't have any buy-in to your community, you don't feel a connection. So that's not healthy for anybody.
Yeah, I can understand. So you've seen a benefit um, with connecting people that may have hurt other people, or just connecting them back into the community in which the harm was caused, right? Like you've seen a benefit rather than just kind of saying, oh, well, they're a scary individual, we should lock them up, don't worry about it, and throw away the key.
Right, absolutely. I primarily work with youth. I've worked with adults. Um, we did, I worked with somebody who the harm that had been caused had happened 21 years ago, and yet this lady still wanted to meet with the person responsible for the harm. Well, serving life, a very lengthy prison sentence, shall we say. And he was willing to participate, and she obviously, she was the person who initiated it. We obviously spent time preparing both parties before we brought them together. And it was an amazing privilege when it did actually, the restorative conference took place, and to hear them talk, and the similarities between the two of them were amazing, in their lives, younger lives. She came from a place of wanting to forgive, but she also had loads of questions that she wanted answered, because as she had gone through the traditional justice system, she was never allowed to speak. Nobody ever asked her, um, her for any input whatsoever. And so she had all of these questions that she wanted asked, that she'd been living with for 20 plus years. And she was able to get those answered. Um, and then the individual responsible was able to, although it didn't change his trajectory, he's still sentenced to a life term in prison, but it was like the only thing he could give her by way of repair was to make himself available, truthfully answer the questions, and have a discussion with her. And it was very healthy for all concerned. In fact, it was a real privilege to witness that.
Working with youth, do you find that the restorative justice process is a little simpler, or just kind of different in scope entirely? What's it like when you're working with younger kids?
Well, it's the same principles. I find young the young people that I work with to be very responsive, because I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about finally somebody's actually listening to me and asking me, well, what? Because really, only that person knows what happened, and the people who committed the harm and the people who were harmed, only they really know what happened and the real experience. And they find it very healing to be able to tell their story from of what actually happened, from their perspective, and also that we take into account, well, what else was going on with you? Because the juvenile justice system, the court system, wasn't designed to address the root causes of the adolescent offending. So, and nor was it designed to respond very promptly. So we can respond in a very timely manner. And in a young person's life, a year goes by, and that's like forever ago. So we can, where possible, we try to respond in a very timely manner in real time, so that people aren't left kind of like suffering and wondering and having questions and all of this, for years. Like the lady I spoke to earlier, she'd been waiting 21 years to have these questions answered. Well, with the youth, we were able to respond much more quickly. And then also, it's an educational piece, because they get to really understand and hear from the person that they've harmed the full impact of what they did, what might have been like. They'll often say, oh, it's all right, they had insurance. I'm like, no, there's a lot more to it than they had insurance.
I do imagine a young kid thinking that, like, it doesn't matter what I did, everyone's fine, no one's hurt, and they had life insurance, okay? Or
they would have had insurance. That was a high-end car. They would have had insurance on that vehicle. Like, no, there's a lot more to it. So it's a really educational, and this is where we build strong communities, because then we're building empathy, and we know that empathy is a proven factor in preventing recidivism. So when you can put yourself in another person's shoes, and also it's an educational piece. Like, you may have had insurance, but it doesn't necessarily make you whole. you know, and it doesn't even replace the with just using a vehicle as an example. It doesn't necessarily replace the vehicle with the vehicle that you had. So, but it's ultimately it's about having, an educational piece of understanding the full impact of your actions, and tying the repair piece to that. um, and they're very I find young people are very, very responsive to this. Yeah, I really, really enjoy working with the youth in our community.
Will you tell me the story that you shared before the last time we talked about the boy who pulled the fire alarms?
Oh,
I love that story. I feel like it's a great example of what it looks like in real life and how it plays out.
so we had a referral for a young man. Well, he was doing several things. He was involved in some fights, but he also was pulling the fire alarm. So when you pulled the fire alarm, then obviously the school, everybody had to, quickly evacuate, and then the fire department showed up, and everybody in his dog shows up, don't they? So um, we, the community of harm here was obviously, the community was harmed. The fire department is the community asset. The fire department had its time wasted. There could have been other things going on where the fire department could have been better using their time. And then there was, the impact of the students were all having to evacuate the building, and the teachers and everybody not knowing if it was a real fire or not. So we reached out to the fire chief, the local fire chief of the department. I had to keep responding and said, look, can we help? Would you like to participate in a restorative conference? And he said, yeah, absolutely. He'd be willing to participate. And so we ended up crafting a accountability piece where the fire chief said, hey, you can come and do some volunteer hours here at the fire station. So they said they had him come and they put him on clean up. He was washing dishes and helping wash the fire trucks and whatever. And then he did so well, and they were so pleased with him, and he responded so well, and he was so interested in everything. They took him out on some ride-alongs, and he now this is really wants to be a firefighter. And so even though he finished his accountability contract, he still now wants to go and volunteer at the fire department. So that built a really good, strong community connection. We had this young, kind of crazy high schooler who just thought it was funny to just hit the fire alarm. He now completely understands, hey, when I do that, all these other pieces are set in motion. And all that has to go on. And he also got an insight into an aspect of his community that he didn't really realize even existed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This is what these people do, and all of this stuff that goes on there. And he took great pride in what he did, and wanted to continue to volunteer there. So it's not about being lenient. Restorative justice is not about being lenient. It's about making sure that people get the support that they need, so they won't continue to victimize or necessarily be a victim. So it's about the community supporting its members to be able to move forward in a healthy and strong way. So that worked out really well. And that's just an example of how we try to connect the accountability piece to the harm that's being caused. Because very often, especially with young people, they don't see the community as being harmed. Like if you graffiti a wall, well, nobody was hurt. Well, actually, no, but the whole community now has to see that, and so the community is sort of like an invisible other, that
Right.
they
Yeah,
don't see.
we live in like a dynamic that at least I know. I'm going to blame globalization on this one, because the idea of the community has definitely it's right here. My community is right here. It's all around me. It's Sandy Springs, Georgia. It's got a government building. It's got a police. It's got a volunteer area. It's got all sorts of people and different things, and I love it. But I don't think of it as like the community, even though I do engage with it, because my world has now been presented since I was a child as global, right?
Yeah.
So there is no more interest or discussion at all surrounding what my aspect and my element is in my community. And so that's why I love restorative justice, because it really just brings it all back down. It says, okay, let's be realistic about where we're centering our energy, and where the actual change needs to be made, rather than saying, all right, kid, pack it up, you're going to juvie. Like that doesn't help anybody at all. And it wasn't until I got to human services that I realized, like, oh my goodness, community is actually really important. Because I don't know at what point, maybe you have a better insight on this, but at some point, community is just kind of framed as the thing you escape, or the thing you have to participate in, but you never really want to, you know,
Yeah.
or the necessary evil, right? And I love that with restorative justice, especially with youth, it really ties in the importance of it, but also the responsibility of the community, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, because we all have a responsibility to one another. Like as a community, we have a responsibility to make sure that none of our members have food insecurity, housing insecurity, that their medical needs are met. Um, and we also have a responsibility to understand what precipitates the adolescent offending as well, and then look at that. And in the same token, the young person has to realize you are a valuable member of this community. Just because you're a young person doesn't mean that you're not a valuable member of the community, because we are all needed. All the community needs all of us to be resilient and strong and move forward and have a healthy, vibrant community of connection.
You see restorative justice, especially with youth, kind of building and track? Is it getting, applied more often, or is it something that is it still kind of sit on the shelf, like as an option?
Well, I can only speak for this part of the world that I'm currently living in California. I see locally in the Bay Area. I see it's really on the rise. There's lots of restorative justice programs in the Bay Area, in schools, and as well as in the juvenile justice system. And certainly in Europe, my experience is it's used a whole lot more. My goal is to make the city I live in the first restorative city in California, and hopefully I'll be able to achieve that one of these days.
Yes. Go, Julie. I love that. Did y'all hear what she said? She's going to make the Bay Area the first city of restorative justice. Hold her to it. All right. Get out there and help her and hold her to it.
Delano County, where I live, just might start off with my county and then hopefully it'll expand. But so the more we can get this in people's consciousness, like in schools, they have restorative circles. So that's a great, you're instilling in a young person's mind, this is the way to repair harm, because everybody's feelings are valid. It just because uh, what hurts one person doesn't hurt another. It doesn't mean that your feelings aren't valid. So it's an opportunity to let people know in a healthy way, this is how that made me feel. So we're starting off in schools with young children in elementary, having the opportunity to sit in circle and talk about how they feel about what's happened. That's just a really healthy thing. And like with a mass incarceration here in America, you clearly that doesn't work. And so I think now, there's more goodwill to look at other ways of handling things. And like I said, it's not uh, doesn't mean that you might not also have to do some time in detention, but it's a healthier way for everyone to be able to sit down, look at each other, and listen to each other's stories, and then you can move forward.
Would you agree with the statement? Understanding something does not validate its existence, or same with the behavior, trying to understand a behavior does not validate that behavior.
Right, because we're not saying, well, it's not an excuse for what's happened, but we're also understanding that, say, on a simple level, if you've been abandoned in a motel by your parent, and you've got 3 or 4 siblings, and then you haven't got any money and you go out and steal food, well, stealing is wrong, but you still need to feed yourself and your siblings. I've had situations like that before. So um, we're not saying that we're it's not an airy fairy, oh, there, don't do it again. It's but we're looking at the big picture. So we're also understanding what was going on in this individual's life that caused this harm to occur.
That's my favorite part. I'm so glad it's so considerate, first off, right? Like to think like I feel like it took a long time, a long 200 so years of our criminal justice system being like lock them up and throw away the key without any redemption involved. And now that we have that in scope, there's two camps. There's the no, it doesn't matter where they came from, what they did, and how it happened. They did a wrong thing. Let's lock them up. And then there's everyone else like us who have to say, wait a minute, it does matter. If we want to stop it and prevent it, not just react to it, we got to figure out what's going on behind the curtain. Um, One side's trying to make a pretty penny and the other side is not, I'd have to say. But I think it's glorious at this point that we're saying something's not right. Let's reevaluate how you got here in the first place. And
Right.
you are teaching this to young people, right? So we're not having to, it's kind of approaching the problem from both ends. Like teaching young people gets them prepared for a restorative future. And then, there's all these other um, people in the world that are working from the other end trying to devalue the system and make it better with restorative justice. So
Right.
it's lovely. I think it's so lovely. It's so considerate, and it's not mushy gushy. It isn't an excuse bearing kind of practice at
Yeah.
all.
And, I know you would know this, but for myself and anyone who's listening who's done any work on ourselves, that's some of the hardest stuff to have to do is work on yourself and own your behavior, your thought patterns, or why you respond the way you do, and then look to repair it. You just reminded me of when I very first started doing this. One of the very first young men that I worked with in a group, he said to me, he said, "You're the first person that's ever told me I'm not a bad kid," and it just threw me at the time. I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "All my life, people have told me I'm bad. I'm a bad kid, or I'm an evil kid, or." And I'm like, some of the things you've done may not be. You may have broken, some of society's laws, and you've not done some good things, but you as an individual are not bad. But those things, I lost count of the times I will hear young people say that, they were told that they were evil um, by an authority figure as well. And I always say, no, 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 because they don't take that on board. You are not a bad person. You are not evil. You may have done something that wasn't good, and you need to be accountable for it. But you as an individual, imagine growing up all your life thinking, only ever hearing you're a bad kid, then you think, okay, well, I must be.
That's exactly how that happens. That's how you get from point A to point B. Just like if you tell a kid they're good, great human beings, they
Right.
probably won't get into mischief. But like telling a child that they're evil, what side of the bed did you get up on this morning? You didn't eat your Cheerios because you shouldn't be telling kids that they're evil. What?
No.
Oh
And
my.
you know, sometimes I've seen they're almost sort of wearing it as a badge of honor, like, but at the same time,
Yeah, I've seen that.
it's not real. It's not. They're saying it, but they're almost looking for validation, like, well, testing the water. And so I always,
You're signaling, right? That's like a
yeah,
signal for please help me. Like I'm evil.
yeah, exactly. It's almost like you can see them saying, well, is someone going to tell me I'm not? But yeah, so but it's a whole, it's like a big ship that's turning, isn't it? It turns slowly, and I think the more we all are educated around other ways of um, doing things, because I primarily work with justice involved youth, but we can use restorative justice in our own families, anywhere. That obviously, like I said, they're using it a lot in schools, but it's just a dignified, ennobling way for everybody to be accountable and um, without blame or judgment, but owning. It's ennobling to own what you've done and say, okay, yeah, and but then have an opportunity to put it right. As opposed to just um, being locked up or punished. We don't do like our accountability pieces. We try really hard to connect them to the nature of the wrongdoing rather than just saying, okay, right, you've got to go and scrub chewing gum off the bottom of the desks for the next 6 months. That just builds resentment and it's humiliating, isn't it? But you can own something, be accountable, and have a way to put it right, and that's empowering. It's also, a lot of the parents that we work with really appreciate the option to, when their child has perhaps had some contact with the justice system, um, they really appreciate being able to resolve it in a restorative way that allows their child or young person to remain in the home, in school, not be removed from society, but also be the one that's held responsible to put it right. So, and it's just, I don't want any, especially young people, just because they're young and somebody else might be, much older than them. That everybody is valuable, or because the captain of industry at City Hall is equally as valuable as the young person. And as a community, we have our responsibility to nurture and raise our young people, because they're coming up behind us and they're going to be running things.
They're going to do it better. We got to set them up to do it better, right? That's what didn't they say that before us too? I think that's what our parents said it to us, and then theirs to them, and
yeah,
we'll figure it out at some point.
Every generation wants the
right
generation to have it better than they had it, don't they?
Which is the irony, though, right? Because everybody wants everybody, at least of their kin line or their community, to have better than they did. And then on an individual level, to some degree, however, whatever language you want to use to describe it, whether you realize it or not, everyone's trying to be a better version of themselves. It's kind of part of that animal drive in us. Like, survival means best fit. Best fit means best self. Like I said earlier, that acknowledging something that you either don't understand or don't like means you're validating its existence. And that's just kind of where it starts. It doesn't, I don't know where people get this idea that the world's going to end if we have these kind of conversations. That doesn't mean I don't understand, but how do we get past that point?
I think, that's what we're seeing that now. I think these old systems that no longer work, no longer support us, they're breaking down, and as they should, because it's no, they're not fit for purpose kind of thing. So taking a restorative approach is about ensuring that all of the community, every member of the community, receives the support that they need. And then the community ties are strengthened, and we're fostering the well-being of our members. It's healthier and it's safer for our communities, because people aren't afraid of each other then, because you have a connection and some insight into other people's lives other than your own. And the people who participate have a greater sense of satisfaction because they've had a voice and been heard and been included. That's the thing. It's inclusive. It includes everybody who's been impacted. But so then, just like the young person gets to see the impact of their actions, the people who have been harmed get to understand about the personal people who are responsible, the bigger picture of what was going on with them. And like we said earlier, it doesn't mean that we say, oh well, never mind. We're like, oh no, but we're educating all of us, because then we're realizing, oh okay, so it wasn't right, but I understand what prompted them to do it. And of course with young people, we're talking about adolescent brains, so we it's just outrageous that we're holding our young people accountable for things that they're not really fully mature enough to be responsible for. So,
exactly.
So this is where the educational piece is much more powerful. And when you have to sit in a space with a person that you've caused some harm to, and listen to, and see this as a human being, that's very, very impactful. And I haven't had anybody yet who didn't respond in an empathetic way and being keen to put right the harm and repair the harm that they've caused.
Do you have any suggestions for viewers watching how they can get involved in restorative justice, or find out more about it? Any foundations or just personal things that you did to learn more?
Well, yeah, a quick Google search will bring up loads of information, and you can look for something in your community, perhaps some training. You'll probably be surprised that there are things going on that you just didn't even realize. There may be an opportunity to get involved, volunteer in some way, take some training. The Howard Zehr, Zehr, many of your listeners may have heard of him. He's sort of considered like the grandfather of restorative justice. In the little book series, he has a very lovely little book that's an excellent sort of primer that you could start with. But I would just do a quick Google search and see what is going on already in your community, if anything. And if there isn't anything, it's a great opportunity to start something. we also provide training for those that are wanting to replicate some of the programs that we run. So that's an opportunity as well. If you're
Julie, you didn't tell me that. I would have been training last Tuesday. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we do not only do restorative justice for the program, for when there's been harm caused, but we also do mentor training. We match vulnerable youth in our community as a way of interrupting an entry point into the juvenile justice system. We try to match young people with trained mentors from their community to kind of like mentor and befriend. So there's a lot of research around the importance and the impact of a non-parent adult who takes an interest in you when they don't have to.
That the whole taking interest in you when they don't have to. Right. Yeah, that always got me about mentors. Like, I'm like, you don't have to care, but you hear and you do. Thank you. Tell me I'm not evil.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And again, on my website, I have a lovely video of different mentors, interviews with some of our mentors, and then some actual video of people who are now grown adults who were mentored when they were young and now give back and are mentors to other young people. So
that's brilliant. You do brilliant work, Julie. Thank you so much.
Well, I really enjoy what I do, so I think I'm very fortunate.
But yeah, that's important, is it not? You have to enjoy what you're doing to an extent. It's not just...
It's very rewarding to work with your community. So whether you like to work with young people or seniors or any aspect of your community, get involved, because it is the most rewarding thing and you can do, and you'll be building strong community in which you live. So.
Wonderful. Well, everyone watching, that's it for today. We will have more information in the description below on Miss Julie Hilt, the work that she does, and other restorative justice topics. And we will see you next time.
You can find previous talks on our YouTube page. Just search NOHS Organization and click subscribe. All of our social media handles can be found in the description box below. And of course, there is a ton more to learn and do on our website, nationalhumanservices.org.